Coming up in our newscast tonight. Starting November 1st, the two Koreas will completely cease all hostile acts against each other. This is to implement the comprehensive military agreement signed by the defense chiefs of both sides back in September. The foreign ministers of Seoul and Tokyo hold talks after South Korea's Supreme Court rules Korean victims of forced labor by a Japanese firm during Japan's colonial rule should be compensated. Some anticipate this outcome would affect similar lawsuits pending in court. In September, the nation's industrial output plummets to lows not seen in over half a decade. However, equipment investment bounced back up after dipping for 6 straight months. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Starting tomorrow, South and North Korea's militaries will cease all hostile acts against each other. This is in accordance with the military agreement inked by the two sides last month to prevent any accidental conflicts. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Park Ji-won has our top story.
In a move to implement the comprehensive military agreement signed by the defense chiefs of both Koreas during September's Pyongyang summit, South and North Korea will completely cease all hostile acts against each other in land, air, and sea starting November 1st. Specifically, the two Koreas agreed to cease various military exercises aimed at each other along the military demarcation line. On the ground, the two sides will cease all live-fire artillery drills and field training exercises at the regiment level and above within 5 kilometers from the MDL, which will create a 10-kilometer wide buffer zone between the two Koreas. In the sea, the two Koreas will cease all live-fire and maritime maneuver exercises within some 135-kilometer wide zone in the West Sea and some 80-kilometer wide zone in the East Sea. The two Koreas will install covers on the bearers of coastal artilleries and close all gun ports within the zones. In the air, the two sides agreed to ban tactical live-fire drills involving diverse aircraft within designated no-fly zones in the eastern and western regions along the MDL. Also, during the general-level military talks held last Friday, the two Koreas agreed to complete the reduction of 11 guard posts within each side of the DMZ by the end of November. Over at the Joint Security Area in Panmunjom, South and North Korea, as well as the U.S.-led United Nations Command, completed a third joint verification of demilitarization measures over the last weekend. The Joint Security Area will allow freedom of movement for visitors and tourists as early as next month. South Korea's Defense Ministry said Wednesday afternoon that it expects the implementation of this agreement to facilitate easing military tension and building mutual trust between the two Koreas. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun left South Korea after spending 2 full days meeting with senior officials here in the nation. According to a government source, the main agenda of this visit was the establishment of a Seoul-Washington working group. Lee Ji-won tells us more.
Deputy U.S. State Department spokesperson Robert Palladino announced at Tuesday's press briefing that South Korea and the U.S. have agreed to establish a new working group. The group, he said, will further strengthen the two countries' close coordination on diplomacy, on denuclearization efforts, on the implementation of sanctions, and on ways for the two Koreas to cooperate within the limits of UN sanctions. This comes as the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, concludes his 4-day trip to Seoul. He's known to have fine-tuned those details with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hoon, Seoul's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs. A senior official at South Korea's Foreign Ministry told reporters Tuesday that the working group will be led by the two nuclear envoys and that it will be launched soon, likely in November. Many have suspected that the reason such a working group was suddenly formed was because of a perceived imbalance in the pace of inter-Korean ties and denuclearization talks, but the official said that is definitely not the case. Establishing the group, he said, is something that had been discussed over the past 4 months, and that it's meant to formally set up a system for Seoul and Washington to consistently talk and continuously work together on the numerous issues surrounding North Korea-US negotiations. The main agenda of the group will be Pyongyang's denuclearization and 3 other issues mentioned by the State Department. But the official said the agenda could become more specific, and the group could even include officials from other relevant ministries as it gets rolling. The official was asked why Biegun met with South Korea's presidential chief of staff Im Jong-seok, who is also in charge of the committee tasked with implementing the 2 Koreas agreements. He said that Biegun mainly sought to meet various senior South Korean officials to carefully listen and learn about the country's stance. During his visit, Biegun met with officials from the presidential office and the ministers of foreign affairs and unification. 이지원, Arirang News.
The defense ministers of South Korea and the United States will hold the 50th Security Consultative Meeting in Washington on Wednesday to discuss extensive security issues, including the transfer of wartime operational control. During the annual talks, the allies are also expected to agree on a specific roadmap for a future combined command structure. The changes would allow Seoul to resume the commander's role, replacing the current U.S.-led Combined Forces Command. Also on their agenda is the suspension of a massive joint air exercise, which has been held annually in a show of force against North Korea. Seoul and Tokyo exchanged views on the South Korean Supreme Court's ruling on Japan's use of Koreans for forced labor during World War II. The court ordered Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation to pay compensation to the victims. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, the 2 nations' top diplomats held a phone meeting today. Despite concerns Tokyo expressed over the ruling, Kang Kyung-hwa told Taro Kono that she respects the decision and that the government will review various factors before taking further steps. Both AFMs emphasized the need to work closely together for future-oriented relations. It took 13 years for South Korea's Supreme Court to rule on the forced labor by a Japanese company during World War II. Attention now shifts to what will happen to similar lawsuits pending in court. Choi Si-young has the full story.
13 years after a lawsuit for damages was filed against Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal at the Seoul Central District Court in 2005, South Korea's Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday the Japanese company paid compensation of roughly $90,000 to the 4 victims of forced labor. The ruling came after more than 5 years of deliberation by the highest court. Will the ruling's outcome affect similar lawsuits? According to the Korean Bar Association, out of 14 lawsuits against Japanese company filed by forced laborers, 2 complaints against Mitsubishi Heavy Industries are pending at the top court.
The Supreme Court's ruling is the first of its kind on forced labor during Japan's colonial rule. It will have a direct effect on future rulings on similar lawsuits.
The Japanese government had argued and still contends that the 1965 agreement concerning the settlement of problems in regard to property and claims and economic cooperation terminates individuals' rights to file independent damage suits. And in the past, the South Korean government has taken a similar view to Tokyo. But experts point to a different approach taken by Japan's Supreme Court.
According to Japan's Supreme Court, individuals' rights are not terminated. They're alive, but just unable to be realized through court trial.
Experts say this means the Japanese government or the company in question should compensate the victims out of respect for humanitarian principles. Neither the Japanese nor South Korean government has heeded much attention to the Japanese Supreme Court's remarks in their discussions over forced labor. Shortly after the ruling, Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono said Japan could potentially take the forced labor case to the International Court of Justice, but a tribunal there can't convene without the consent of South Korea. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's overall industrial output inched down last month, mainly due to falling production in cars and electronic parts. In contrast, equipment investment climbed after sliding for the 6th consecutive month in August. Go Ryuni breaks down the digits for us.
South Korea's overall industrial production has marked its sharpest drop in more than 5 years. According to Statistics Korea, industrial output in September fell by 1.3% from the month before. It was the sharpest on-month decline since March 2013. The agency said the decline was caused by reduced production in the mining and manufacturing industries. Auto production in particular fell by almost 5% due to lower domestic demand. Another major factor was a decrease in the production of electronic parts, caused in turn by lower demand overseas for locally made display panels. An economic expert says Korean companies are facing new competitors in the field.
China has been supplying substantial quantities of panels. Korean suppliers are losing their markets because of the Chinese competition, I think.
Retail sales also decreased on month by 2.2%, following a gain in August of 0.1%. This was because of lower sales of passenger cars and cosmetics. In contrast, investment in equipment rebounded in September. It gained nearly 3% after falling for the sixth consecutive month in August. The rebound was mainly due to increased investment in equipment for making semiconductors. But on year, it was down by almost 20%, meaning investment for the year as a whole is looking grim. An analyst says this is because of economic uncertainties at home and abroad.
There are more uncertainties because of the ongoing trade spat between the US and China. Also, the rise in open market interest rates made investment more expensive. Overall investment is likely to continue to slow down.
Statistics Korea added that the indices showing current economic conditions and future outlook fell in September from the previous month by 0.3 points and 0.2 points respectively. Scrutiny, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics released its third quarter earnings report. Data shows the tech titan posting record quarterly profits, thanks mainly to strong performance by its semiconductor unit. Kim Ji-yeon provides a closer look.
The South Korean smartphone and chip maker Samsung Electronics says it posted record operating profits of more than $15.4 billion during the July to September period. That's a near 21% jump from the same period last year and some $61 million more than its provisional estimate released earlier this month. The report also shows combined sales of $57.5 billion, up 5.5% on year. The lion's share of Samsung Electronics' earnings came from its chip unit, which recorded an all-time high of nearly $12 billion in operating profits. The company's IT and mobile communications division posted moderate operating profits of around $2 billion, while sales were at around $22 billion. Its consumer electronics division recorded operating profits of $491 million. Samsung Electronics projected record-high operating profits of around $57 billion and combined sales of around $219 billion for this year, although it also says fourth-quarter earnings will be lukewarm compared to Q3 as the memory chip market enters a period of seasonal weakness and prices of DRAMs and NAND flash memory chips decline. The report also cites marketing costs in its smartphone business, which continue to increase. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Turning to some stock market action now, finally we're seeing some small positive turnaround after a rocky few days or a rocky month. The main index closed higher than yesterday. Here's Kim Hye-sung with a roundup of South Korean equity markets.
After some topsy-turvy midday trading, South Korea's main index closed at 2029 Wednesday, up 0.7% from the previous close and marking a second day of gains. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also rose about 0.7% thanks to gains overnight on Wall Street. But then again, October was a brutal month for South Korean stocks, with the main Kospi index falling 14% or $229 billion, which is the worst monthly drop since the 2008 global financial crisis. It's also down more than 20% from its peak in January when it passed the 2,500 mark. In October, global equities saw a wipeout of $8 trillion on factors like the U.S. rate hike, the U.S.-China trade conflict, and disappointing U.S. companies' earnings. Given that stock markets have a cycle of ups and downs and that they've rallied for years on record low interest rates and easy money, some say markets are now in correction territory. But still, compared to major markets, South Korea's main index fell in October by the largest margin.
The Kospi fell 14% and the Kosdaq over 20%. That's more than China's monthly loss of 10%, the 6% in the U.S., and the MSCI emerging markets average of 10% loss. Putting particular pressure on local markets have been concerns that the U.S.-China trade conflict will hurt Korea's export-oriented economy and its IT sector.
To help stabilize the market, South Korea's financial authorities announced a series of measures early this week, which will include the injection of a $428 million fund into undervalued stocks. Such announcements helped lift the Kospi back above the 2000 level, but experts say stocks are likely to remain sluggish for some time.
Stocks reflect an expectation about future growth. But now, investment and economic growth are slowing down, and Korea's manufacturing sector is losing competitiveness. There's no new sector with bright prospects right now.
And with the U.S.-China trade spat still weighing on markets, creating global uncertainties, experts say local and global stocks are unlikely to go back to pre-October levels, at least until the U.S.-China summit at the G20 in Argentina in November, and that's if the two sides do reach an agreement. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
During today's parliamentary audit, the National Intelligence Service was under scrutiny. Rival lawmakers questioned North Korea's movement and also debated plans to transfer the agency's investigation rights. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
North Korea appears to be preparing for a possible visit by foreign experts to its nuclear test site. During a closed-door parliamentary audit on Wednesday, rival lawmakers quoted the National Intelligence Service as saying that there have been signs of preparations and intelligence-related activity, and that the North has been revamping accommodation facilities and the entrance near the Yongbyon nuclear complex. North Korea had said during the Inter-Korean summit in September that it would be willing to shut down Yongbyon should the U.S. take corresponding measures. In May, it demolished its nuclear test site at Punggye-ri in the presence of foreign journalists and has torn down some missile launching facilities at Dongchang-ri. Another topic of heated debate was reform of South Korea's spy agency, in particular the transferring of the power to investigate communist activities to another agency. Reforming the NIS was one of the key pledges of President Moon Jae-in as a way of preventing the abuse of power, in view of the illegal activities that the agency was involved in under the previous conservative governments, such as intervening in politics and monitoring civilians. Currently, one proposal is to give the power to investigate communist activity to the police, but the conservative opposition have been against the idea, saying that the agency's main role is to prevent and detect enemy espionage. Rival lawmakers said they are working on a deal to provide a grace period of 3 years, even if they write the change into law. But some opposition lawmakers said if that's the case, then the actual amendment should be pushed back for another 3 years as well, or be carried out under the next government. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Delegations from Seoul and Pyongyang will meet at the Joint Liaison Office on Friday to discuss inter-Korean sports exchanges. This is part of implementing the agreements made at the high-level talks earlier this month. South Korea is sending a 4-member delegation led by its Vice Sports Minister, No Tae-gang. The North's delegation will be led by the Vice Sports Minister, Won Gi-ru. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the two sides will discuss forming joint teams for future international sports events, including the 2020 Olympics and launching a joint bid to host the 2032 Summer Olympic Games. November is typically associated with college entrance exam, colder weather, and making kimchi here in Korea. But recently, the month has also become synonymous with shopping, as this is when major online malls offer their biggest discounts. Hong Yu explains further.
Korea's largest online shopping malls are holding their biggest sales event of the year starting today. Previously considered an off-season month in terms of sales and revenue in the past, November is in the spotlight for being one of the best months to attract shoppers in and out of the country. Amid the increasing popularity and dominance of major sales events overseas, such as Black Friday in North America and Singles' Day in China, major Korean online retailers have come up with their own special promotions. One of Korea's biggest online shopping mall, 11th Street, made more than $56 million just in one day on November 11th last year through its discount event known as the 11th Festival. The same event is planned for this year as well.
Electronic devices and home appliances like TVs were the most popular items sold last year. We have analyzed customer shopping patterns based on their age and gender. With the results of our study, we plan on optimizing our product catalog to suit the preferences of our online customers.
This year, major names in the online shopping industry are targeting not only local customers but also foreign shoppers as well. Gmarket, another household name in online shopping, is kicking off today its event called Mega G, which runs through November 11th. The company even has a dedicated platform called the Gmarket Global Shop, which makes the purchase process much easier for foreign shoppers.
Our platform is provided in 4 different languages, namely Korean, English, Chinese, and Japanese. When foreigners purchase from abroad, they can use diverse types of credit cards and online payment methods such as Alipay or PayPal, thus simplifying their shopping experience.
The worldwide popularity of K-pop was reflected on the hottest purchase items among foreigners. K-pop goods alone showed a sales increase of 77% on year.
With many sales events planned for November, the industry hopes that the month becomes a major shopping season in South Korea, just like Black Friday in the US and Singles Day in China. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, several cases of sexual abuse and violence by soldiers during the brutal suppression of the May 18th democratic movement have been confirmed. A joint investigation led by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, the Human Rights Commission, and the Defense Ministry identified 17 such cases. 8 of them were newly filed to the investigation team, and 9 were confirmed by documents recorded during the movement and documents of compensation for the victims. The victims included high school and college students and homemakers. The May 18th pro-democracy movement in Gwangju of 1980 helped lay the groundwork for democracy in South Korea. Autumn is in full swing in Korea. During this season, there's a number of short getaway options for tourists. To help people enjoy some of these hidden attractions, the government came up with special package programs. Won Jo-han gets us better acquainted with Autumn Travel Week.
Smiling all the way, people hop on the bus looking forward to a journey to enjoy crisp and clear weather with colorful leaves. The 5th edition of Autumn Travel Week is here with a unique program called 공간 여행, in which 20 spots have been sorted into categories such as places recommended for families, couple dates, trips with a friend, or solo travelers, featuring locations from popular Korean movies or TV shows. Out of those 20 attraction spots, the city of Nonsan in Chungcheongnam-do province was picked as a site recommended for couples to enjoy. Visitors walked around a 300-year-old Nonsan Myeongjae tradition house, also known as the Yunjung's Old Mansion, which serves as a prime example of an aristocratic class house during the Joseon dynasty. The house, located at the foot of the mountain, provides a warm and romantic vibe for couples to hold hands and soak in the morning autumn breeze. And for the afternoon, it gets even better.
As part of the tour, the couples also visited Sunshine Land, a site featured in a Korean popular TV show, Mr. Sunshine.
A huge studio venue within the Sunshine Land that has officially opened to public on Wednesday provides an opportunity for visitors to relive the scenes from the drama. And for those who are willing to experience some action scenes, the newly opened Sunshine Land Military Experience Center provides visitors a live-action war experience called Survival Game. Couples wearing body armor and helmets find themselves immersed in an exciting and hyper-real-world shooting game. Throughout the entire journey, the couples say they are taking great experiences back home with them.
I enjoyed it a lot because I learned something new about this town. I used to only think of Nonsan as a place that had a military training camp.
We came a long way to get away from our daily lives. We liked it a lot, especially the historic vibe this town has.
Won Jo-han, Arirang News, Nonsan.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, it's quite cold during the day, but the night it's a different story again, much colder.
That's right, Daniel. Now, the daytime high was in the teens, but as of 8 p.m., the temperature dropped nearly 5 degrees Celsius. Now, it's expected to get colder into the night, lingering below the seasonal averages by the morning. And dry, cold air is constantly blowing in from the northwest, and the sky will be clear and sunny in the nation. And so will be Beijing and also Tokyo as well, with daytime readings similar to southern parts of the peninsula. And the morning low in Seoul makes it down to 3 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Busan and Jeju gets a warmer start of the day at 8 and 12 degrees respectively. And the sunny conditions will warm up the country very quickly. Now Seoul reaching 14 and most of other regions getting up to around 16 and 17 degrees. And bright and blue skies are expected to continue for some time, and by the weekend, the temperature should be back up into the norms. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into our newscast at this hour. Thanks for watching. Good day or good night, depending on your time zone.